Now, most people I speak to think they have no choice but to retire when their state pension starts. Others might think they can retire a bit earlier, around the age of 65. But what if you really want to retire as early as possible? And what if I told you that for as little as £100 a month, you could actually retire at age 60 rather than 65, 67 or 68? Now, for many of us, £100 a month is maybe a gym membership we use maybe once or twice a month, or maybe that habit we've got into of buying a coffee every single day, which for me is what I'm guilty of. But what if you actually use that £100 to put into your pension? Could you actually retire when you want to with the income you want? Now, this is one of three levers I'm going to speak about in this video. But when you combine all three, you could actually retire 5 years earlier. 5 more years of freedom and 5 years less of working that grind day in, day out. But if you're new here, my name's Ben and I've worked in financial advice for the last 10 years. And my aim is to help as many people as possible gain more clarity and confidence around their personal finances and specifically their retirement plan. Okay, so let's set the scene with a fictional example. Now, in this example, we've got a woman named Charlotte who's currently aged 46 and she earns £60,000 a year. Now, her current plan is to retire around the age of 65. She's currently got £50,000 in a pension pot, and we're assuming that based on her investments within her pension, that's going to grow on average at about 4% a year above inflation. And the fees that Charlotte's paying on her pension are 1.2% a year. And she's contributing the minimum auto enrolment into her pension. So that's 5% from her and 3% from her employer. And you can see that based on her salary, that's £250 a month from her and £150 a month from her employer. So in total, there's £400 a month going into that pension pot. Now, in terms of how much Charlotte's looking to spend in retirement, obviously that's quite difficult to do when she's still 20 years away from that. Now, based on her current expenses, she thinks that would be about £2,000 a month. Now, as we do with most financial plans, we assume there is a drop in that spending from age 75. So in this example, we've spoken to Charlotte and said, okay, well, from age 75, we're going to assume that £2,000 a month goes down to £1,500 a month. We've also assumed she's going to get the full state pension from age 68, which at the moment is £12,500 a year. And you can see that in this example, Charlotte's mortgage is going to be fully paid off by the age of 57. Okay, let's start to model that and see what it looks like in practice if Charlotte did continue those contributions and continued working to age 65. So you can see that for the first 3 years of retirement, all of her expenses are going to be met from her pension pot. Then from age 68 onwards, we're going to have a large chunk of her expenses being covered by the state pension, meaning the withdrawals from her pension pot can reduce. And again, you can see that from age 75, they reduce further, at which point most of Charlotte's expenses are being funded from her state pension. Now, based on the assumptions we've made, Charlotte is projected to have a pension pot at age 65 of about £185,000. And assuming Charlotte spends that £2,000 a month from age 65 to age 75, and then reduces it from age 75 onwards, we're projecting that at age 90, Charlotte would have a pension pot remaining of about £30,000. Now, this is the sort of buffer we really want to be looking for when we are putting these retirement plans in place, because clearly that is beyond the average life expectancy, but we still want to have a little bit of a buffer there should you live longer than the average life expectancy. Okay, so we've seen that age 65 works based on our current plan, but what if she wants to retire earlier? What levers can we pull to bring that date forward? So the first is clearly to save more. Now, as I said at the start of the video, in this example, we're assuming she saves an extra £100 a month into her pension. And in this example, Charlotte's employer is willing to match the increased contributions that she puts in. So she puts in an extra £100, her employer puts in an extra £100, and therefore in total, there's an extra £200 a month going into her pension. Now, the second is to benefit from increased returns. Now, clearly this is the one that is the most out of our control because markets will be what markets are. But ultimately, over a long-term time horizon, and by that I mean 10 plus years, you would expect that the higher equity content you've got within your pension, you're likely to get improved returns. So by increasing the equity content within Charlotte's pension, we would expect that that assumed return would go from 4% a year above inflation to 5.5% a year above inflation. And the final thing we can do is reduce cost. And this has a massive impact because ultimately, the more you're paying for your pension, the less of the return you're keeping. So in this example, we said to Charlotte, look, let's move your current workplace pension into something a bit more affordable, which is going to reduce the annual cost from 1.2% to 0.5%. So based on those three levers, what impact does that have on Charlotte's retirement plan? Now, You can see here that we've projected that in this example, those 3 changes would mean that Charlotte's pension pot is £230,000 by the age of 60. This is £45,000 more than in the previous example and 5 years earlier. And you can see that again, we've projected forward to age 90 what Charlotte's pension pot would be worth. And based on our assumptions, that would be about £50,000 in today's terms. So again, £20,000 more than in the previous example. So from this example, you can see that a few small changes can have a huge impact on when you can retire. Now, clearly I've said you're saving an extra £100 a month in this example. But although you're saving that extra £100 a month, because you would be retiring 5 years earlier, how much more are you actually saving over the course of your working life? So you can see here, I've mapped out how much you would be saving into your pension in each example, based on you retiring at age 65 versus age 60. So you can see that based on you retiring at age 65, you would be saving over the course of your remaining working life about £57,000. However, if we look at the example where you're retiring at age 60, so 5 years earlier, your total saving over that same time frame is £58,800. So although I've said you're going to be saving that extra £100 a month, over the course of your remaining working life, you're only saving an extra £1,800. That £1,800 combined with the other levers I've discussed can mean you can retire 5 years earlier. And I think this is something people really often overlook, because I think people often think that you need to have massive drastic changes to really make sure you can retire earlier. But ultimately, there are a few tweaks you can make that can have a massive difference. So for example, in your circumstance, you might say, okay, well, I'm going to save an extra £150 a month rather than 100, but perhaps I won't actually increase the equity or the risk I'm taking within my pension. So as I say, there are multiple different factors that you can take into account to actually move that retirement date forward. But you can see that from this example, based on those 3 levers, it could actually be possible to retire 5 years earlier by saving £100 a month extra, which over the course of your working life, because you are retiring 5 years earlier, is only £1,800. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video and got some value from it. If you did, please do consider subscribing to the channel for more videos just like this in the future, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.